Here you can see the epoxy that's broken down on the solar panel supports on the top left there. We're looking at the rail there with 5 coats of International Compass varnish. The first 2 coats were diluted 30% and the last 3 coats by about 10%. Here are the various fittings that I've put back just as an example. I'm used Unibond, black Unibond filler, black Unibond mastic, and you can actually wipe off the excess using ordinary white spirits. Here you can see snatch block and the lead on the right hand side, and you can see 4 screw holes. These screw holes were okay, but they're so close to the edge of the cavity there that some of them, a few of them have broken down and need a dowel fitting or some replacement wood fitting. Also, the screws on many of the fittings were starting to corrode, and so some of them sheared off as I undid them. These 2 of them, I think 2 or 3 of these screws, I needed to drill out very slowly, very carefully drill out the bronze screws, which was very easy, and then I could put in new bronze screws. These 2 bolts here are slightly oversized. They're not the same size as the others. I've left 4 older bolts and nuts in the box. Here's the mushroom vent, which has also been eased using a blowtorch and stuck down again, and it leads into the engine compartment extraction vent, and you may want to remove that. You have to access through the rear locker. It's just held on by a huge Jubilee clip and can be just detached. You can access the extraction fan through the floor in the cockpit. If you decide to keep the extraction fan, which is just to remove the fumes for about 10 minutes after the engine stops, then you must remember when you're going on a big sail to screw the mushroom vent right down to prevent any water going into the vent pipe, and also with all the mushroom vents, just to rotate them backwards and forwards now and again. You can ease them off using WD-40, but once they seize you need to remove the fittings. Apply a blowtorch for about 10 minutes, 5-10 minutes, not maximum, and then using some heat-proof gloves you can rotate the mushrooms and free them up, and then apply WD-40. This is me patched up and cleaned the front hatch cover. This is made of duck cloth, which I bought untreated very cheaply. You can buy it much cheaper if it's untreated. Then you soak it in water just for a few minutes, then dry it out, and it contracts by 10% along its length. And then you can sew it. I've got a sewing machine that is also, I've put on the additional equipment that you might want to buy. I've got 3 sewing machines. A heavy duty jeans machine sorts this out, and you can see I put just a couple of crude patches on there. I've every year or two they get some mildew, of course, like all these covers, and for this I just use a fairly strong bleach solution, put it in a bucket or a bath for the main sail cover, main boat cover, and scrub it a little bit so it comes up reasonably well. And then I apply a penny mildew homemade solution as a protection, and then finally I waterproof it using again a homemade concoction using white spirit and exterior silicone sealant. I can explain how to do that, or give a link. That's showing the spray hood cover, which is made of a different material. That's proper sailing material. There's the mast boot I made up, but if you're going to take the mast down, you can put buy another one that hasn't got any Velcro fastening at the back. This isn't particularly this isn't the waterproofing. It's I think it's just a cover for the waterproofing mastic tape and mast tape underneath. This needs this particular one hasn't been tied down yet. I was going to use big ties, which I've got. The top of the mast boots, again, it's made of duck cloth, treated again in the same way, totally waterproof. The top lip is folded underneath and held down by a cable tie, and the bottom is just a cable tie around the bottom. It's not subject to any great forces, so it stays in place. You can also see some marks on the front of the mast there. That's caused by the elastic of the spray hood. When you take the spray hood back when you're sailing, you can take the spray hood back if it's not raining and tie it around the front of the mast. And so that probably needs a thin piece of leather, velcroed or sewed around the mast, just to prevent some wear. That's particularly not very nice meal. You can see my radio on the right hand side there. I've got a DAB radio, cheap DAB radio. Here's the solar panel regulator. That's which is run by rechargeable batteries. This is for repairing 3 different colours for repairing the spinnaker, or rather the gennaker, and the sock that I made. I think the blue one or the red one blue one maybe is completely new. They're virtually new and virtually complete. These are the items that were in the front right hand drawer, the forward right hand drawer in the cabin. These items were in the drawer next to the chart table on the right hand side. These are the two of the liquids for the main engine on the boat. You can see it's got transmission fluid rather than gearbox oil. This is the picture of the set of tools that I carry with me on the boat. This is an additional hose pipe, 30-meter hose pipe for the boatyard and fittings. Here are a collection of the paints currently being used on the boat, and sealants. Got some Stockholm tar and grease and so on, acetone. This is the dinghy bucket, which contains an anchor and kit and so on. And here's the ocean life raft, a very expensive one, but it does need a service, and they cost about £300 a service. You can see the service is 2013, so it needed a service before I even bought it. I paid, I think, £1,000 for that. Here's a repaired Taylor stove pipe. I put a new section of pipe in. There's some more left over, and there's the clip to hold down the main flexible hose so that it doesn't move the pipe anymore. That's all tested and working. I've removed the 2 signs at the back of the boat, so you might want those, but at the moment I'm assuming you'll rename the boat in any case, you need to revarnish the transom. There's the dinghy. It's quite an old dinghy. I bought it quite old, and I made a couple of wheels. They just need a bit of WD-40, a bit of grease in them. There's two engines, a Mariner and Suzuki. The Suzuki is is much lighter than the Mariner, but the Suzuki I bought new for I think £650. It's always caused some problems. I spend £100. A dealer looked at it twice, and it seems to conk out about 10 minutes after it's been running, which is very odd. I don't know what's wrong with that. And then there's the Mariner engine, which I bought second hand. That's never had a problem at all. It's heavier, but it's very reliable. A couple of cans there, one of water, one of diesel for filling up the boat. A couple of oars, and a cable with a padlock, with a combination lock to keep it safe in the boatyard. These next three photos just show the two extra poles that come with the boat, the gaff pole, the top gaff pole, and presumably another pole that used to do with the top sail. They're extremely long, and if you transport them, you'll have to lash them to the deck and sail them up to when you eventually leave the boatyard, and sail them up to Hayling Island. Just a couple of extra tools I forgot. There's an axe and a saw. That's the the forward right hand stopcock that I eased. That's the third one that was missing. That's just a dab radio I use. Here's some dowels I made up, 40 dowels for the deck. There are other dowels, mahogany dowels for the inside. I've got three main packs charts. This is the main one for the coasts, and the Solents follows. 2015, I think. Most of them haven't been used at all. This I bought, I think, last year. I think I went to France last year, and so that's essentially a new chart, hardly used. And here's just one I've made up for navigating out of the harbour and the river. The radio is an AIS radio. I replaced that so I can get warning of ships and an alarm. It's also got an anchor alarm. There's the Suzuki manual. This is the main operating manual for the engine. Very reliable engine. There's quite a few manuals that go with all the different parts associated with it. There's the Eberspacher diesel heater. Very efficient. But as I mentioned, the control needs fixing. That's just the registration, which I'll give you on handover. And there's the bill of sale to me. There are other bills of sale in the documents. This is a McMurdo personal EPIRB that I have attached to my life jacket. That's also for sale. This is the autopilot. Not much to know there really. I've got a video demonstrating its use later on. Only use it under engine power, because it drains the battery a lot. That's just the Avon Life Raft manual. It's got a plotter, as you can see, the main plotter screen. It's also a fish finder, and it's pretty basic. And a couple of displays inside the cabin and outside the cabin. It's very useful and works very well. depth sounder, depth gauge, and so on. There's the Eberspacher control, which doesn't really work properly. You can use the fan on the left and the heating on the right. More of the Furuno gear. You can see the 2 GPS aerials on the top of the cabin roof. But I use it, it's very effective. I use the anchor alarm and other things, usual waypoints and so on. This is the main EPIRB on the boat. This is a document I came across with a different photo. That must be the original owners. I'm going to keep this unless you want to buy it for £50, but this is a watercolour, framed watercolour, and I just put it down on there on the back of the chart table using some Velcro. There's the chart table lamp. I didn't use that really. I used a red headlamp when I was navigating. A fairly ancient control panel, but it all works. And you can see the leisure battery there on the left. Personally, I would replace the leisure battery and get a new one, which I did earlier as well. There's the AIS radio, which I've demonstrated all the electrical equipment works later on in the video. The right hand brush is for the deck, but really you have to be very careful about brushing the deck, as I said. There's a battery charger, lots and lots of batteries used on the boat. I use lots of Eneloop AA and AAA batteries, and there's a couple of 9 volts as well. This is an underwater torch, which I use for inspecting the hull. A few spare special rechargeable batteries and a recharger. Very good torch. Just a couple of headlamps with red and white light. The locks, external locks, they don't look too great, but the tall one is for the rear locker to keep it open, propped open when you're away from the boat. It's a Cestral hand-bearing compass with luminous paint for night time. That's a handheld anemometer. It's a bit more of a gimmick than anything, I think. That's the sheared bolt, showing that the seacock, forward lower seacock, was sheared rather than corroded. Someone must have taken that off. A couple of torches. I usually have about 5 or 6 of these, various pockets and drawers and front and back of the boat. This is the studding, nuts and washers to replace the mast plate in the studding bolts in the cabin through the cabin roof. This is the navigation equipment that I've got. Oh, and that's used for, I was experimenting with putting some mosquito net on that and then placing that over the open portholes. Just cut out of some plastic. I can't remember what I used. There's demonstrating the covers. I made a couple of covers, quick covers, for the control panel and the plotter. Those are the 3 Perspex cockpit door. Very useful when you're at anchor. That's the example of the basin I use. I use a very, very small plastic box to save water. And here's the ordinary Brita water filter. I've got 5 new water filters. I explain the water system later on in the video. Various bits and pieces, soap and brushes and things. 4 plates and 4 bowls. One of the bowls is chipped. Very securely placed. And there are six mugs. One is different because I broke one, and a couple of glasses. These pots with their lids very high quality. They could be resurfaced. I don't know. I haven't bothered. I use them though, and I put some whipping around some of the handles because they get hot. Kettle, the cooker could have a bit of a clean up, but that's usual. Just using polish or brass or something. Kettle and a rectangular, very handy non-stick frying pan, and you can see in the top there's a chopping board, and those two things on the left are to secure the kettle in really rough conditions, but the conditions have to be very, very rough. This is the oven, a couple of trays there. The bottom one is a heat dissipator. And you see on the blue, I'm just demonstrating here the strap to hold yourself in, and also there's 3 little squares of mosaic tile missing, but those are in the drawer next to the chart table. Here's the chart table restraining strap that I put on as well. Again, only for very, when it's very rough. These are all the things underneath the sink. You see the fire blanket there as well, and the missing fire extinguisher. Need 2 new fire extinguishers. Some cutlery and various items. The cutlery probably needs replacing, but got some other decent equipment there. Proper rubber boat bucket. There's the main boat hook. Bit of decorative whipping there as well. There's the windlass, another huge piece of bronze. Thousands of pounds of bronze on this boat. And the anchor. Here's the bits. I put on an extra rope you can see in the trailing off to the left there, and I use that to secure the central safety line. There's the bowsprit, bits of leather and so on. They all need rubbing down, treating now and again with some of that tallow. Here are some storage bags I've made up. Same duck cloth in the loft, in the in the cockpit there. Very useful. I put all the lines on the left and other things like food and drink on the right. Two coats of Hempel multi-coat will give a good finish. Expect to do that every couple of years. I use a roller, very quick and easy. And personally, I put in another 3 coats, probably of epiphanes, to make give a nice finish on the tow rail and gunnels and cabin side. You can see the starboard cabin side there. That's not using international compass. I didn't rub that one down. It takes a long time to reduce it to bare wood. And if I did it again, I'd remove the portholes as well, which is a bit of an effort. But that will avoid any scratch marks trying to sand around the portholes. That's a big job. Use a random orbital sander and other sanders. So that's got international wood skin, which is very easy to apply, and you can just rub down, lightly rub down, and any worn spots I rub down, you can see some dark spots there, and the sun will sort those out eventually. Wood skin can be applied very, very quickly, just with a wipe down, a few coats a year, and there are some other boats on the river that you can see that use wood skin. You just have to keep on applying it. It's quite easy to remove as well, easier than varnish. There are about 55 additional charts, a couple from one of the East and Western channel, that they're more recent. These are about 2000 to 2005. I've given the details of all the numbers. You can see the spray hood up there, and the spray hood can be taken forward and tied to the mast. These are some boots, hardly worn, sailing boots. They're quayside. This is my sewing machine, one of my sewing machines. I've got a 1930 Singer, which goes through 5 layers of sailcloth. That's really, really tough, but it's only single stitch. Then I've got another one, a metal one, a bit later. But this one I bought really because I wanted a backup, which was a very strong, reliable machine. And this does lots of stitches, and is a jeans machine, which is why it goes through such tough material as not for sailcloth, but it's for the all the other things you want to make using canvas. And that comes with I'm selling that with various bits and pieces like the sailing thread and so on. There's a couple of boxes of fishing gear. I may keep that, but I've offered it for sale as well, including a fishing rod as well. I have 2 main life jackets with harnesses, both with dual harnesses, short and long. The one on the left is my main one, and you can see the McMurdo EPIRB there, which I have in a pouch as well. I've also got an extra lanyard on the or harness that I've made up out of rope on the left, and that's for when I'm sailing, and that gives me an additional point to tie into. The one on the right is a new unused life jacket. It's really just for an extra person, and as a simple harness as well. This is my older oilskins. They cost a fortune, Musto, but they're 5 years old now. No, I think they're longer. Well, they've been used for about 4 or 5 years, and so I've got some cheaper but newer ones. But these are good probably for a guest. This is the oil for the engine. It's a specific kind of oil, and there's about 18 litres. I've only used about 1 litre or 2 of that because I had some other as well. There's the very expensive cockpit cushions that cost £460 to make, and the climber for the mast. I've got a tree climbing harness, so that's never been used as far as I know. Here's the fishing gear with the fishing rod, brand new, everything. The fishing rod is brand new and not used. A good fishing reel and so on. And here we are on the river. This is the electrical box next to the cockpit entrance, and I'm just demonstrating the battery switch. First position is the off, and then the second position there is one is the leisure battery, middle position is both batteries, and the final position is the starter battery. So when you're running the engine and charging it up, make sure it's on all, so you charge up both batteries. And when you're at on the river, I take the door off and keep it on the floor of the cabin, just to remind me to make sure that I turn it back from all back to the leisure battery. So you only want to obviously you only want the leisure battery running when you're not running the engine, just to preserve the starter battery number 2, position number 2, which is in very, very good conditions, very high quality battery. The leisure battery, I would replace that. It's quite easy, but I'd probably replace that now. I've been charging the other one up in the boatyard using an ordinary battery charger. But the battery, there's not a great deal of energy from a single leisure battery, which is why you have to run the engine now and again when you're living on the boat on the river. That's an electrical cabinet that I made, just houses, keeps a few things together. And as John mentioned, the wiring could be tidied up, put into conduits maybe, but at the moment I take care when I put things inside and take things out of this cabin. There are the 3 breathers, and one of those just needs to put a U-loop higher than the exit, as John mentioned. Any tubing can be used, probably just using Jubilee clips. Here's the AIS radio. Very pleased with that. And it's got oh, and here are the 3 switches. This one down is for the bilge pump, and when you push it, the right hand one is for the bilge pump. When it's down, it's on automatic. When it's in the middle, it's off, and when it's up, it just comes on straight away, and you can hear it when you test it. Middle one is the extraction fan from the engine compartment. And the left one is just a bit of a cheat. I put just a simple flashing electric bulb, red LED, instead of installing some security system. So it just seems like it's got a security system. And here I'm just putting the radio on, VHF and the Decca, GPS. Press and hold to turn it on. And it's at the moment, the last time I left it, it was on the AIS. That's the AIS system, which shows you whether there's any boats coming your way. And there's the ordinary channel 19. There's a menu. Hold to get the menu, and you can then change the AIS setup, twisting the knob, pressing it, and you can put on the CPA alarm, closest point of approach alarm, and I use half a mile, so anything that comes within half a mile or is on course to come in contact with within half a mile, and then you just rotate the knob to get the alarm on. And there it's set, and if at any boat it comes into within the range or is picked up at all, you can then get the details of that boat. And there's a very annoying alarm when a boat comes within that range or it points towards that. I think it's probably 5 miles away. It detects the boat. Not to be used in a port because there are too many boats around. This is the horn. Here are the boats, the birds on the boat, birds on the, and there it is. I don't have the sound, unfortunately. I've cut off the sound. And so I used that to scare the birds away. That's just a little manual of signs and lights and rules of the road. Here's the emergency cable cutter if you need to cut the shrouds. Hopefully you never have to do that. There's the EPIRB, the main one, instructions and so on. That has to be registered. Not sure you have to register it with your name or just the boat. I had to register it. I think you have to register it with your name, new owner, or new boat name anyway. I use these simple drain pipe elbows to aerate the boat while it's at, on the river, or if you're on the mooring. One goes forward, one goes back, points backwards, and that gives a very good through draft, together with the cockpit hatch, front cockpit hatch being kept open, slightly open. I did mess around with a fan, which I've now removed. It takes too much electricity, and it's just not that effective either. So this is the best way to keep the boats dry, or as dry as it can be. Here's the front cockpit hatch. It's got a main catch, but I've also made two brass long catches, and I've got a couple of little locks. And so when you're away from the boat, you can put the locks on, and the cockpit hatches open slightly to give a through air current. The only thing you must remember is not to walk on the hatch when it's open like this, because the brass isn't that strong. It won't break, but it'll fold over, and then you'll have to get new catches. There's the airflow. It's a bit of security. Here's the front of the boat, right hand side, starboard, and this is the dinghy inflator, I think. Yeah, electric dinghy inflator with an extension cord that goes right up to the electrical box, and you take that through the front hatch and inflate the dinghy on the front deck. That's the rope to tie down the dinghy, and I've used an old aqualung tank boot to protect the propellers when it's inside the cover that I made for the dinghy and the engine. That's a winch handle, and this is something you've already got, which of course is a Walker log. This is a particularly good one. It's got you can see all the gear inside it. It's got a couple of propellers and all the other stuff. I have another one at home, so we have three between us, I think. That's paraffin can I've got there for the Taylor stove. There's the top quality tiller with my attachments. It's also got a leather cover over the whipping. Here's the second, the backup boat hook, again with lovely whipping. There's an additional pole there, you can see at the back there, a long pole. I don't know what that's for. It's got a couple of holes in. It's a bit dark in here. There's that pole. Underneath it, I've got, I was just experimenting with poling out the Jenica. And so I've got a couple of washing line, extendable washing line poles. And I put a couple of fittings on. I'm just experimenting with how that works. So what I wanted to do was goose tail with the also with the staysail and the front and the jib. That should be Jenica really. It's a huge sail. I've made a sock for that, and here's the bag I made for the dinghy and the engine. The engine goes on top, dinghy underneath. It's difficult to get it in the bag, and then it ties down onto 4 eyelets that I put onto the deck. That's the staysail. No, that's the no, I think that's the trysail, emergency trysail. I put that in a locker now. There's the toilet, you can see there. The toilet lid really needs to be tied down in some way. That's the staysail, and then there's the jib. I tie the jib together with just a couple of bits of small stuff. There's the flopper, what's called a flopper, and that reduces the swell when you're at anchor. We've used it a couple of times in conjunction with a leather diving weight. That's the fisherman's anchor, which I never use. And then forward there's 2 or 3 big ropes, spare ropes, and there's a couple of flat fenders. Various lockers, front 2 lockers, the catches, oh that catch works. Lots of spares and stuff which you'll need. These are the engine spares at the front, and I'll go through those in a bit. Two 5-litre cans of diesel, spare diesel, and then there's a water pump with a length of flexible tubing. That's to drain the water tank. It goes. I've got a couple of clips that go straight onto the battery. Front left locker. These are air filters and oil filters, diesel filters, other engine spares like the impeller, a couple of impellers and so on. There's several of each, I think. This is a syringe for draining the and filling the gearbox. This is a diesel pre-filter. It's the main oil filter. Couple of cam belts. I mean, not cam belts, alternator belts. A few gaskets. Particularly important gasket is the round rubber one there. You can see that ring. That's for the heat exchanger. 2 new impellers. I'm not sure. I think those are also the same heat exchanger rings. Air filter, pretty easy to change. I'll go through an engine service later on. That'll be a separate video. I've added a few more extra long cable ties, various bits of cable and elastic cable as well for the boat cover, the main winter boat cover, which I haven't actually taken a photo of yet. that needs bleaching and mildew proofing and waterproofing, and it also needs the cables, the ties to be improved. Here's the electrics box. There's an asbestos mat, multimeter. Pretty important, all this, to have this all the time. Loads and loads of fuses and spare bulbs, some flux, some LED bulbs, little ones for the compass, external compass, steering compass. Lots of connectors, including waterproof connectors for the solar panels, and crimping connectors and so on. Those are the LEDs for the external compass, the steering compass. Some extra cable for the there's some cabling that was left over from the radio, and fitting an electric fan, and also the solar panels. There's some various tapes. There's hook and loop tape, sticky back. There's some self-amalgamating tape, very important, of course. Ordinary sellotape, small and large. A few pieces of soft leather. That's some caulking cotton. I used a bit of that for the replacing the bolt on the stopcock recently. This is the I store my boots in here, but it's another useful little locker. There's my Dunlop fisherman's boots, steel toe, steel top, warm lining, very good, about £70, far better than sailing boots, I think. Lots of space in that locker. And coming out, there's the oh, here's the locker on the port side, which contains the tools and the fenders. And looking at the port side, yes, the port side above the bunk, this is the main steering compass that you've seen. Again, very high quality piece of kit. There's the LED, the red LED that comes on. There's a switch that turns this on inside, I'll show you. There's the connector, the waterproof connector. I haven't varnished that base, so that really needs varnishing. I think it's teak. So you have to push and screw this. It's all a bit delicate, and I've put some more amalgamating tape around there now. The switch is on the left here, and also on the main control panel there's a switch. This top left one, I think. No, it's this right one, bottom right one, that's it. And that gives good illumination in the night. I've stuck it in there with a piece of the LED bulb is kept in place, I think, with a piece of blue tack or some candle wax or something, but it's good illumination. This is contents in the forward right cabin drawer, which has got all the batteries and things like that in. Scalpel set and so on. I'm not including all these batteries. Lots of them are rechargeable, but all the non-rechargeable ones I've put in there. There's some brushes, 3 different types of brush for 3 different types of purpose. On the left, this is really empty. There's a lead line which I made up because that was missing from the inventory when I bought the boat. And I've got a couple of tie-down harnesses just for luggage straps. I'll probably take those back with me. That's the lead line, simple lead line I made. Underneath the right hand side of the chart table, that's where I keep all lots of bits and pieces. I've left the essential parts for the boat. That's a hygrometer, temperature gauge. Good idea to keep an eye on the humidity. So max-min simple thermometer. Various sharpeners and pencils and things. Insulation tapes. A bit more amalgamating tape, and that's the monofill wire for securing shackles and so on. Those are from the dinghy, the inflator caps. Oh, that was that's an example of what happens when the impeller goes. Some blue tack, pretty useful. I've got a couple of Zippo hand warmers, which really come in handy when it's cold, down the boots or in your pockets. Elastic bands and so on. Those last few things are for accessing the floor of the cockpit, and that's the water filler cap access and also diesel access. This is just a small adjustable spanner. I keep a few things like a small screwdriver as well for Jubilee clips there. Some extra keys. Earplugs. Another cap remover. Oh, it's an inspection mirror that I usually keep in the toolbox. Those are the missing mosaic tiles from the underneath the cooker. just needs some sticking down. Various pens and pencils. I use China graph pencils, which you can just rub off with a tissue on laminated pages, and I've got a whole folder full of laminated charts and navigation aids that I've made up on the RYA Yachtmaster course. And then I use soft pencils for the charts. This is just to show there's an extra compartment to the left of the sink, and I've used that for bottles, paints, but that's useful for storage. It's more difficult to get to that space, so used for things for long-term storage. And by the way, those doors might get caught on the floor there. You can see that wooden floor. You just have to press that floor down. That filler you saw was the for the diesel heater. These are the tool sets. That's top quality gas soldering, auger bits, vise, and so on. Little hand plane. That goes in the front left, the forward left, in the locker. Simple cheap drill that can be recharged using the same charger as the battery charger. Various saws and so on. That hooked tool, you can see the blue handle. That's for removing the deck caulking. A couple of grabbers. This is a grabber. You're seeing that's kind of wire thing, and then the one below that is a magnetic grabber, just for picking up things from the bilge. Both have been used quite a few times. I like to have a complete toolkit when I'm sailing. Anything go wrong. The top right hand wire you can see there is just for clearing out the any pipes like these self-draining cockpit pipe. There it is on the top left. There's also oil filter remover and so on. You've already seen that. That's the cable cutter, hopefully never to be used. I think, and all these things I use marine grease to protect them from rust. This is for the bilge. There's not a great deal of that bilge paint left, but there's enough for a few jobs. Primer and anti-foul. Primer and anti-foul. There's lots of that. That's at least 2 coats. I want to put 2 coats on before launching, and then another extra coat on bits like the rudder. This is the boot top, which I was going to paint dark blue. That's the main varnish. That's a new pot, and this is half a pot I'm keeping for myself. This is like 2/3 pot of wood skin, which is used for the starboard side and inside the cockpit. Anti-slip pearls and the same top coat, multicoat paint, to go on the cabin roof. There's a full can of that, and then a bit left over. Those rollers are for the anti-foul. This is primer undercoat for that top coat, the top sides. It's about a can and a half of that. Here's some thinners, a couple of special thinners, which you need to use for those top coats. That's the Unibond mastic I use for the above water deck fittings. Aquaseal, that's a bit blocked up, but it just needs a bit of screwdriver to get out the dry stuff. I'm not so keen on that really now, but that's a sealant, a marine sealant. And then there's the Sikaflex caulking. Was one new one and one half used, and that can be used to replace any caulking that seems to be coming loose. It could do that maybe once or twice a year, little bits. There's a special tool I've made up to rake out the old Sikaflex. It's pretty expensive stuff, that. And this is the one that I use, the Sikaflex 291i. This is the adhesive, so it's much stronger and can be used to stick things together underwater. So that's to be used underwater for the things like the seacock fittings, or putting over any bolts that you remove and then filling up the space above them, and also putting onto the bolts as you put them through the hull to create a watertight seal. There's not much of that left, so this is the wonderful smelling stock-on tar for various whippings above deck. Do that once a year. It's a bit messy, you have to be careful with that. And marine grease, very important to use that liberally everywhere. This is for filling the top sides, very good filler. And the grease, the tallow for the all the leather work. Here's the steel. Here's the stern tube grease. There's not much left, so you'll need to get another can of that. Put in a new reel of frog tape, of course, so you need that for the paint work. This is something new I bought also. I've just used it a couple of times, and this is for filling all those little leaks that you can't find. But it'll follow the path of water and then fill up the leaks. So I've started using that. There's just a couple of leaks, and I've identified the leaks, the main cabin leaks, which are at the front corners, vertical front corners of the cabin walls. And ideally, I've applied that, and if it doesn't work, then you can then just rake out some of that and use some mahogany filler. Bit of WD-40. The WD-40 I use for well, obviously for easing off all the hinges and locks. It works on the bronze, and also for a squirt now and again into the key socket. Acetone for cleaning down. I'm selling that if you want that. It's half full, I think. I use that for the especially for the rails. Here's the dinghy repair kit. So there's something for the engine. There's a replacement bolt for the wheels at the back, tubing for the draining the petrol. This is the fuel filter. It separates water and fuel. I'll take that fuel fit probably. That's just to give the fuel an extra life. I'll probably have that for my home appliances. Foot pump, and also the oil on the right is 4-stroke oil for the outboard engines. There's anchor, 2 kilogram anchor chain, I think about 30 meters of line. And now I'm just demonstrating that all the lights are working. The steaming lights, the lower navigation lights, and the tricolour light at the top. Tricolour, of course, is the one you use the most. The tricolour and the lower navigation lights are all LED now. I've replaced all of those. You can see the tricolour. There's the front, and you can see the steaming light as well at the front. The steaming light is an ordinary light. I didn't replace that with a LED. And you can see the port and starboard lower navigation lights. There's a specific kind of electric contact grease that I use, and that's very important to use that on all of those external lower navigation light terminals. There's the dinghy. Dinghy has been patched a few times, so it's still got another 50 years left in it, I expect. is the mariner. It's got a when I turn off the when I stop using the mariner, I take up the top of the engine and then turn off the fuel line inside. I think that's because someone's messed around with the knob, but also it's an extra security thing in case someone tries to start it. And it's got a the turn off engine turn off button, electrical turn off button. That's been replaced by some kind of car one. So it all looks a bit naff, but it's a wonderful engine. Just goes on and on and on. Very tough, quite heavy, and so it needs a bit of effort when carrying it aboard. But if you find it difficult, then I'd use a rope and just draw it up from the dinghy using a rope. The Suzuki is much lighter, but it's caused me lots of problems. I'm sure there's a small fault, but there's the cable, secure cable. Oh, here's more video of the topsail gaff and mast. Big pieces of wood. This is from the starboard side of the cabin. Some boxes, various adhesives, Loctite, pretty important. This is the electrical lubrication I was telling you about for the any of the contacts, but very important to have that. It's quite expensive, that. Just some super glue and hard plastic glue I've used to repair some of the, like the top lens on the tricolour, for example. And this is for Wellington boots and any other rubber wear. It's very good stuff, and there's some patches that go with it to repair holes in Wellington boots and other rubber wear. This is my rope kit, which I really only want to sell if you want to buy the whole thing. It's got quite a few reels, some of them completely full reels of whipping tape, whipping line. Got some small stuff over there on the left. Some of that I used for various bits of whipping. The masking tape is just used to help splice the ropes. I do enjoy a bit of splicing. I've done a lot of splicing on the boat. This is the hand speedy stitcher, very useful, and that can be used for repairing the mainsail tear, little mainsail tear. Those stickers are just for hook and loop Velcro stickers. These are the fids I use for splicing the rope, and my palm. These are the tools for securing the eyelets. I've used those on the when I repaired or put in an extra reef on the staysail, for example. There are various shackles in this box and elsewhere, lots of shackles, and there's some D-rings and so on. They're all 316. That's a ripper for the sewing. Cut the sewing line. I don't know what that is. Eyelets. Those are little squares of sailcloth just to reinforce any kind of small tear or eyelets or whatever. Threader. A complete set of needles, including for the speedy stitcher. The sewing machine has got its own tough needles. This is surgical tubing, and there's another, I think, 2 or 3 meters of that somewhere else. There it is. It should be kept in the dark, and that's for the self-steering, so it needs replacing every year or 2. You can also make catapults out of it. Another 316 ring there. These are the steering lines I use for self-steering. Oh, that's just an extra dowel. I can't remember what they're called. 4 of those for the self-steering. You use 1 or 2 depending on the strength of the wind. I've just whipped those as well onto those shackles, onto those carabiners. That's another pin, nicely done. Everything was nicely done on this boat. I think I've re-glued that pin and varnished it. There are lots of blocks, but these are the main 2 blocks I use for the self-steering, 1 on either side. I use additional blocks elsewhere for say the mainsail, the Jenica. Those are 2 extra lines that secure the tiller, also for the self-steering. And there are 4 of these, you'll see them in a minute, 4 reef lines for holding down, tying the reef down to the mast, down to the boom. 3 of those. That's the main control line. So just that line is the line that does most of the work when in the self-steering. These are some porthole covers. Get a bit of darkness. Also useful when the boat's at anchor or on the mooring rather. Some privacy. This is a box of assorted screws and bolts and nuts. These are quite expensive things, all of these, well, most of these things, because they're made of silicon bronze or 316 steel. And all of them have been used, split pins and extra carabiners and catches and loops and things. Those screws are for the protective battens that are underneath the dinghy when it's placed on the foredeck. But I've removed those. They're in the. I'll probably show you them later on. I've removed them because they're very fiddly to keep varnished, and but those are the screws that secure them. So various new shackles and so on. Those are spring clips for the levers, the whatever they're called, the Hankinson levers, or I can't remember their names, for the running stays, back running stays. This is the latest screws and bolts and nuts I've bought from Seaware. Just that lot was I think £45 or something. Those are the extra older bolts there. Those are the extra ones for the fitting I showed you in the rear of the cockpit. Charging points for the cameras and so on, for the mobile phones and so on. Here's the chart table. That's just an inspection camera cover for the one of the water tanks. There are 2 water tanks, 120 litres each. Here are the rails I was talking about, protective rails. I varnished them. Well, I think I used wood skin, but they deteriorate so fast and then look a mess. So I've just removed them. I filled the holes with some kind of mastic. It's an extra pin. And another decorated pin, and that's for use in the cockpit, those pins. There's 2 of these charts, there's Eastern Channel and the Western Channel. These ones I didn't include in the photograph earlier. But there are numerous charts, and these charts, many of them I obtained them from the sailing school. They were giving them away, so they're 2001 to 2005. That's the handheld radio, which is also for sale if you like, with and there's the shoe at the back, charging shoe, and it's also got a separate charging emergency battery pack with using AAA batteries. Well, that's just the bill of sale and the registry. So you'll obtain new ones of those. That's the compass rectification chart, which says there's not really much. Here's a plan of the boat as I've laid it out, so you might want things differently. And there's all the details of all the things in all the boxes, so just to be able to find things. So that document there will give you quite a good idea of all the things I've worked out I need for long distance travel. A logbook, the electrical manuals. All the manuals are there. There's a fish finder as well on the plotter, so there's lots of things to learn about. I used the fish finder a little bit, but I was so busy with sailing I never got round to fishing much. That's the handheld radio manual. It's got a lot of functions, including waypoint, man overboard, and so on. The Eberspacher heater, and you need to run that heater once a month. Just turn it on, run it for a little bit, just to make sure it's all working properly and stop it from sticking, clogging up. These are the navigation pencils that I mentioned earlier. I've got two plotters. That's the one I use, but I've also got a square plotter as well, if you want that. There's a red side headlight for navigation in the dark. I think it's about me to demonstrate. I'm about to demonstrate the Taylor stove, which is pretty much an art. I'm going forward there to show you the paraffin tanks. There are two paraffin tanks, and they're linked together, and they're both turned on, so the pressure equalizes between them. There's the filler. And you need quite a few. You need a few hundred of these strokes to pump it all up, and you want to make sure that both of them are in the red. And don't fill the tanks, only half fill the tanks, unless you're going on a long journey. You need some air in there to create the pressure. I suppose you could fill one tank and almost fill the other tank on a long journey. There's a fuel filter which I just haven't changed. I can't find a replacement. You can see that one's in the red now. This is a tank I made. This little black tank you see there is a tank of paraffin, and that's used for the hurricane lamp, so I'll show you that later. Okay, very important, the sequence now. Some methylated spirits. 2/3 fill the cup, and you'll have some left over afterwards to go back in the bottle. Put that in the lower cup of the burner. Pour the remainder back. There's a metal sheet you can see above the burner, so that protects everything from the heat. Here's my, set fire to that and turn on the main supply. A couple of turns, a couple of half turns. Make sure that there's enough, you've turned it enough. Okay, put the kettle on or whatever, and there'll be flames everywhere, but it's quite safe. And then you're not wasting any fuel. In fact, sometimes you heat up fuel just using heat up some food, for example, just using the meths. You don't even need to turn the paraffin on. 20 plunges of this water. Oh, a bit of something in there. The water goes through an inline water filter from the tank, and I'll show you that later. Also, there's I use Aqua, I forget what it's called now, Aquasol. It's a chemical that cleans the water. It's very safe, and I put it through the Brita water filter 3 times. And all of that so as to make the water nice and fresh. And you can do this at sea. It's you just have to keep the water filter over in the back sink there. You can see the flames there, and those flames there are part of the cause of the black soot on the bottom of the kettle and everywhere. So that needs wiping off now and again. I also opened the porthole above the cooker for ventilation. That's the third time going through now, so that will be the water treated. Still going. This is just the meths. Takes a few minutes, maybe 4 minutes or so, but you want to make sure you're there for when the meths stops burning. That's very important. If you leave it more than 10, 20, 30 seconds, you'll never start the paraffin cooker, and then you'll have to switch to the other burner because you can't restart the burner once it's hot. That's dangerous. That blue igniter, that's the one I'm leaving on the boat. But I've got a more powerful one as well, as a backup as well. Okay, it's coming down, not long to go. The knob underneath the control knob, it's very important not to over tighten these knobs because they operate a very small, fine brass needle thread. So I've got my igniter ready, the gas torch ready. I'm waiting for that flame to disappear. If you light it, try and light it with the meth still going, it'll affect the paraffin. So wait for it to just go out and then get the light going. Very, very slightly turn it anti-clockwise, very, very slightly. And if you leave it there, it'll just go out. So you need to very, very, very gradually, really very gradually. It creaks a bit as you turn the knob. Very gradually increase it until you've got a reasonable sound of a flame there, and it looks sort of like it's healthy. Now you can have it on low like that, or you can increase it, but wait a few minutes, and then you can increase the flame again very gradually. Now if you completely rotate the knob, continue anti-clockwise, then you have an automatic priming needle that comes up through the jet to clean the jet. And of course you don't want to do that while it's running, otherwise it'll turn out and there'll be petrol squirting out and it'll be a right mess. So so if you want to prime the jet before you start this whole process, when it's cold, you can turn that knob completely to the left. Again, don't tighten it at the end, and then you will see the very fine needle clean the jet and then turn it right back. But that's one of the main causes of problems with the paraffin stove, is people over tightening it. And the other main problem is people turning on the paraffin knob too fast, and then it causes a big flame. You can overcome that by using the torch, the big torch I use, and you can direct it straight onto the burner underneath the top of the stove, and straight onto the burner, and then that will gradually increase the pressure in the burner. But it's a real bit of a mess, and you might as well just stop, switch over to the other burner, and start again on that one. I'm not sure what we're seeing there. Oh yes, this is the operating the hurricane lamp, which I got from Germany, and I painted it with some I forget the name of that paint. Okay, we go forward to the tank that I made. Remove the compost. That was the toilet compost container. I think I filled this, or I filled it whilst. What did I do? Yeah, I think I've already filled that. Undo the filler cap. Undo the cap at the top of the can. Just makes it a bit easier to flow. Inside there I've got a lot of caulking, so there's no actual sloshing around of fuel. Turn the tap on very carefully again because it's all a bit fragile. And I count to 10, but 10 to 20. 20 would be ample, but 10 gets you just through the night. Most times I wake up and take it down and the flame is still burning. So it's very, very fuel efficient. Light it inside the cabin, otherwise you'll never manage it. There's the wick. Don't turn it too quickly, otherwise the wick might disappear and then you'll have to go and replace the wick, which is really awkward. I like to be miserly and turn it really quite well down. And what follows is a bit longer than it normally takes. So I hadn't disentangled the lines for a long time. Here are the lines. This is the how I secure it, with one of the carabiners on a knot higher up. Trying to disentangle this a little bit, got a bit twisted up. And this little line goes to a block on the cross tees. There's another one on the other side which you could use for flags. Okay, I put this, one of these lines I put underneath the safety rail. But I firstly look up to the top to make sure it's not twisted. So normally all of that you don't need to do at sea because it's not twisted up. Okay, put one line, the left line underneath the rail, and that one goes onto the bottom. The other one goes onto the top of the hurricane lamp. And all you have to do is remember to keep tension on both lines as you pull it up. And it's going to go right to the top, so the hurricane lamp is actually in contact with the cross T, and that will stop it shaking around. And it doesn't twist up. The way I've organised it, it doesn't twist up at all. So right to the top, and then tie off the bite. Oh no, you tie off the single line around one of these belay pins. And that's it. So that's the anchor light. I'm just showing the inline water filter here. There are two tanks and therefore there are two taps, and at the moment unless you're on a long run, I just keep one tank empty. You can see the left tank is on, and that's the starboard tank that I usually fill up. It's closer to the cockpit too. The filter is supposed to last 6 months, so this has hardly been used, this filter. They're about £20, I think. You've got to make sure you get the same one though, because of the connections. Here's the Aquasol. Use a cap for every 25-litre container of water, and that stops all the nasties growing inside the tank. But you saw earlier the pump, the water pump, which you can use to drain the tank. It's probably a good idea to do that every year. Here's on the port side the Eberspacher heater, and I'm just demonstrating that when you've finished a run, then 2 turns of the stern grease gun, and you need to get some more stern grease. You can fill that up a bit. I use a bungee just to keep this all these locker lids up. This is the automatic bilge pipe which goes into the self-draining locker. It's perfectly alright. Just got to remember to put it out when you leave the boat if it's on a mooring. That's the emergency throwing line. This is the only bilge handle that I need to use apart from the one in the cabin, which is used for draining the sink. That's because it's the lowest part of the boat at the back there. Just showing you the things that I keep there. Apart from I was keeping the fishing boxes there as well. I've removed them now. This is the diesel filler. It's a siphon filler pipe with a funnel as well. And I put them in several bags just to keep the diesel off. Inside the funnel I've got another one of these fuel filters. It separates the fuel and water, and it slows up the filling, but it means that there's that the fuel is clean. So I've drained the fuel using a different pump which I have at home. I drained the tank and then cleaned the fuel and put it back. I did that a year or two ago. But a professional cleaner of the tank, I don't know how they do that, but the tank is not accessible. There's the siphon, and I use the 25-litre diesel plastic containers. I place it on top of the cabin cabin locker, and then get everything sorted out and ready, so as to avoid any leaks or spillages. Most times it's I just fill the diesel straight into the tank without using the filter, and without using the funnel as well. I just put the pipe straight into the filler cap. But the diesel itself can be filtered through separately, filtered into another container. I have 2 containers. That's just if you suspect the source of the diesel is contaminated. This is the diesel fuel stick, measuring stick, and the full tank, which is 70 litres, it's full when it goes up to 11.5 or 11, to give you an idea of how you're doing. Here's the filler cap, and The tool to open it is inside the here. It also opens the other caps, one in the cockpit floor and one in the diesel diesel heater inside the cabin. A separate handle there, which I've not yet dropped. If you drop that, I think that's a bit of a problem. It's all very sturdy though. This looks like the hose pipe and water siphon filling tube. This is a hose pipe, flat hose pipe, just for make it easier to store it. It's not long enough for the boatyard though. Various connectors and fittings which you need because they always disappear from harbour taps. There's always the fittings are always, someone always takes them off somewhere. And I just showed you the starboard water filling cap. And here's if you use them, the steaming sign, triangular steaming sign, and the circular anchor sign. Virtually no one uses them. They're just such an awkward thing to put up. Starboard locker. Of course, that seat needs some work doing to it. That's some deck cleaner, which, well, it's not necessary, and I think I might remove it because it encourages brushing the deck, which is a bad idea. The brush brushes out the soft parts of the teak, and that's why all these modern boats, you see a thin veneer of teak, wavy, because they've brushed out all of the soft parts of the wood, and then it has to be sanded down, and that's the end of the deck. So there's no need to brush the deck. Just use an ordinary metal scraper with water to get the algae off, and that's all you need to do. There's the anchor. I bought this kedge anchor. Oh, I'm just showing you the buoy there, the anchor buoy, and that's the kedge anchor. I bought that at a boat fair. Very good kedge anchor, and a line and chain. That's the cable. That's the ladder, rope ladder I made for for getting on and off the boat when you're in the water. That's some engine oil, that's engine oil just for servicing. The main oil you've already seen. I have the kedge anchor always ready when I'm in close quarters in a harbour. Various lines, more lines than you need really. That first line is the line I was going to use as a spare halyard. There's a block at the top of the mast which is not being used, so that first line I've bought that. It's the correct length for a spare halyard. A couple of mooring lines, that's the big ones. Another spare line. That's probably for the might be for the Jenica, that one of those. And this was the purchase that the original owner had on, which I made up again using whipping and splicing. There's a block. It's all very nice, but unnecessary. The sails just aren't that heavy. And you can see I replaced the main halyard, so the jib halyard, with classic rope. And that the jib halyard, I mentioned to you, it twists over a period. It twists, and so it means raising the jib sometimes on the port side and then sometimes on the starboard side. I'm just pointing out that that rope is for the that line is for the spare halyard that I was going to fit. I had a small line fitted through the block ready to pull it up, but during the winter the line just chafed and broke, so it means climbing up the mast or fitting it when the mast comes down. And while we're on it, the mainsail, that needs, well, a little bit of repair, as you know from John's survey, but also it really needs someone like, one of my projects was to go down to Essex to the sailmaker, James Lawrence, get them out on the boat, which they probably enjoy because his father went out on it when the sails were made. Oh, that's that's bilge cleaner. That's not so you can use bilge cleaner, or you put it with water. But what I did, I've filled up the bilge quite a few times with Ecova, because I'm sensitive to smell. Ecova washing liquid, not washing up liquid, washing liquid. And you go sailing for a day or so, and when you come back, it's sloshed around, it's cleaned out any oil and gunge in the bilge, and then you just drain it out. That's demonstrating the newly eased mushroom vent. Here's the that's the steaming light connector, little steaming light. I think I'll show you later on. Maybe I didn't show you putting those on, but usual first aid thing. That's the RWA one. I'll leave that one, I think. Oh yes, maybe operating the compost toilets. Oh, maybe not. Oh, here's the here's the tools. Yeah. So I put all the fenders in there. They all fit in with the tools. All of the tools. It's a bit of a bind, but then you're not having to access it that often. Certainly not when you're sailing. There's enough fenders, including a bigger one as a roving fender. The socket set is also used for removing the cockpit floor hatch. I've got a hand drill there, which is useful for some awkward places. And there's an auger as well. All the sockets necessary for the boat. A 17mm is the important one for the cockpit floor. And I keep that up in the drawer next to the chart table. That's the soldering iron, which I've used a few times, occasionally fixing things at sea. And underneath here is the Taylor's paraffin stove box. All this stuff is incredibly expensive. So there's quite a lot. There's a few old spares there and a lot of new stuff. And you'll see how delicate the fuel needle is. That's some gasket compound, various bits and pieces in there. I think I go through it. Spare burners. There are two types of spare burners. One's with 3 pipes and ones with 2 pipes. The 2-pipe one is the more reliable, I think. I found. I wouldn't really touch any of that unless it goes wrong. There's a spare needle, a couple of spare needles, tops there. The stove itself could do with a clean-up, but it's functioning perfectly well. Here we are again. This is in more detail, showing a better view now. By the way, on the right hand side you can see some bungee cords, and they're used to hold everything down, the paraffin can. Here's the needle valve, and you can see the fineness of the thread, and that's why it's so easy to strip that thread. These are various bits and pieces. Those are ferrules, I think, for the pipe, copper pipe. I don't know what those are. All these are very specific pieces that occasionally need replacing. And tailors charge huge amounts of money for all this stuff. Those are the needles, and the shiny ones are the new ones. That's the thing you might need to replace, but only when they go wrong. It doesn't need a service, you know. I wouldn't service it. Just wait for something to go wrong. Ferrules and the new copper pipe. It's ordinary microbore copper pipe for central heating. You can see there's a bit of gaffer tape on the top there. It's very, very heavy, this, and at one point I slightly dropped it slightly and it cracked the case, but it needs a service anyway. So and you have to, it's typically about £300 to get a proper good service, replacement parts and so on. There are thousands of pounds, these ocean life rafts. This is a 4-person ocean life raft. Extra storage space at the so what am I looking at here? It's all upside down. This is the port locker, one of the port lockers. Oh dear. It's all out of shot. There's a bag with all the blocks, spare blocks. So there's lots of spare blocks. Very useful for extra sails and so on. Small lines. Oh, it's all out of shot. How annoying. Upside down and out of view. So I'm just demonstrating, I'm just pulling out all of the small lines, bits of rope and so on. There's also a few unusual things that I never found out what they were for. So there's lots of big lines and small lines, enough extra rope, more than you will need. Oh, I'm sorry about that. That's very annoying. Upside down and out of shot. That's the little vacuum cleaner that runs on the 12 volts. So that's the forward locker on the port side. That's one of the extra memory foam cushion covers. I have one of those, an identical one with the foam in it, which is at home. But I had to replace the both of the port side memory foam cushions because they were totally impregnated with detergent, strong smelling detergent from one of the previous crew, so I just took it out and destroyed it. So it's about 5 centimeters of memory foam topping, and it makes the bunks more comfortable. So the starboard one is still there with a cover I made, not very well made, but this is extra storage behind the bunks. This is on the port side again. That's the flags, the alphabetical flags, and you can see down there there's a Vertue flagpole. There's an ensign flagpole. Oh, that's where I've kept my fishing rod. There's a brand new fishing rod, and also the spare life jacket. I must have been wearing this head cam upside down. A piece of wood, I don't know what's for. That circular lid is for the compost toilet, which I haven't yet demonstrated. A piece of rubber, waterproof rubber. Just I put in lots of extra little things, anticipating making repairs at sea, and I was thinking I had a roll of lead and things like that, thin sheet lead, and there's the lee cloth, of course, very useful. Oh, that's my tree climbing harness. So I used one ascender, but mainly used Project loops, Project knot. But I think in future I'd probably get another ascender, so 2 ascenders. It's not so good on the ropes. They're good for climbing ropes, but not so good for sailing ropes. But then you're not up and down the mast that often. There's the cloth, the extra memory foam topping cushion I made. There's the lee cloth. That's where I store on the starboard side. That's where I store the dry foods. On the port side, same position I store the canned and jars. This is one of the storm sails. I think it's the storm sail. The storm sail and the trysail I've used them a couple of times just to make sure they work and see how they tie up and so on, but they're unused. Because of the gaff and the reefs, it would be exceptional to have to use them. Here is the showing the stopcock that I've eased. And below there you can't really see it, but those are the two stopcocks that go to the toilet, one in and one out. But of course I removed the water toilet. That's the bolt that I replaced. And they're bunged off. The bungs need sawing off. They need sawing off and then knocking into place. You don't need to paint them particularly. You could if you like. They're made of ordinary pine, but the seawater won't affect them. And storage, of course, behind this one, the right way up now. And you can see this sticky back hook and loop. I've got that's what some of the reasons for the tape. There's a spare shroud. That's the it's a bit too small, but it's a fender board, useful for coming alongside a harbour wall. That's a spare jib, and here's the spare tiller, again nicely whipped. So for use in emergencies, obviously, if for some reason the jib breaks or what next? Oh, there's the £1,000 door. Sometimes that handle becomes a bit loose, and then you have to tighten up the spindle on the control, a spindle on the lock. This is where I keep things like the toilet rolls and so on. And inside there is the Eberspacher control wire, and I keep that off because the trouble is the heater turns on its own for some reason. There's a control problem somewhere. And here I'm just joining the two blocks together, and then immediately it probably starts draining the battery. Again, the Eberspacher heater is really drains the electricity a lot, so you shouldn't use it for very long. Just 10 minutes to heat the cabin up. I start off using just to press the fan on the left. That's the cold fan, just to make sure that the connection is working. You can hear the fan, so I'll show you where it is. There's an inlet at the bottom and an outlet where my hand is. So that shows the electrical supply is there and it's working. And then if you press the right hand top button, which is the heater, there's a thermostat on this Eberspacher control, but it's virtually irrelevant. So there's no point in adjusting the temperature or so on. But and after a little while, it takes about 2 or 3 minutes for the injector to start working, and then it gradually heats up. And there's the air intake. I put that air intake in there. The air intake was from the engine compartment, which is pretty odd. So that meant all the fumes from the engine compartment were coming in. So I rerouted the intake. I also boarded off all of that area from the main cabin with plywood. And then to turn it off, just detach the two. The fan will still keep going for a while because it's got to cool itself down. So I'd replace, take that cable and connector apart, and then make a simple switch connector to turn the thing on. Or pay Eberspacher to come and look at it, which, well, that's going to cost you quite a bit of money. You want to check if you use it, you want to check the level of the diesel in the tank next to the sink. I use these bungee cords to stack 3 of these containers on top, so it's held down sideways and vertically, and the door also is kept open, the front door, forward door, and that's where I keep all the fresh food. And there are, of course, all these string bags that I use for clothes and so on. Here's the autopilot, which I keep just below the chart table. And you can only use this when the engine's going because it drains so much electricity. It also is a bit annoying, really, because the arm, you can see, it only pushes out to the port side, so it doesn't pull back sufficiently to be able to steer both sides. But it's used for maintaining a course. There's the control, and there's a certain marker, a vertical marker, to show that you've plugged it into this socket underneath the locker. There's a place where you can put the cable so it doesn't get squashed. And then, of course, there's a control on the main panel to turn on the electricity. And this integrates with the Vertue navigation system as well. There it is, the autopilot. So you can see it's a separate short tiller there. And you can either manually turn it. You can also, when you're underway, you can also go by 10-degree intervals using the tack button. Press it on auto, it will just maintain that course, unless the seas are very heavy. If the seas are very heavy, or yes, if the seas are very heavy, it finds difficulty maintaining the course because of the pressure. But very useful only when the engine's going, of course, and it saves having to hang on to the tiller, motoring back, which is extremely boring. This is the cockpit floor, a lovely teak grill there, very expensive. After finishing the repairs at the boatyard, you really want to clean all that out, because the dust tends to collect around the inspection hatch, making it very difficult to pull up. You'll see the process. You need the 17mm socket, this little key, and a socket spanner. Socket wrench. Now, when I first had the original survey, the guy couldn't get this off, and so he couldn't inspect below. And that's because it hadn't been open for a long time. That's waterproof, of course. You can see, like, by my right foot is one of the 2 drainage holes. I've got lots of reducers and in here for all the different types of socket. And there's some non-metric sockets as well. It's not very tight. Well, it comes open very quickly and then it's very loose. And what you're doing is getting to a point where the securing arm below starts rotating, and you'll feel that. Then you screw in this key into the top. It's very odd. Screw it in 3 or 4 times, and then you can pull it up. But you'll find it you have to whack it a bit. And the only way I got it out originally when I first did this was going through the engine compartment and using a hammer to beat it again and again, because it was so bonded in with all the grit. And you can see there's the floor of that opening is a rubberized material, and it's best to brush that out and keep that clean to make a completely watertight seal. There's the extractor fan. You can see that white fan. That's the engine compartment extractor fan, which I put in, which you may want to remove. There's the drive shaft and all the things that are quite close to it, which John mentioned. There are various ties that I've put in and that other people have put in to keep everything away from. There's the extractor fan hose, which is held in place by a big Jubilee clip. You can see how close those pipes are, and you can then use various extra tie clips, cable ties, to keep them away from the rotating shaft. Now we're upside down again. Oh right, this is demonstrating the lower navigation lights. So 3 of them, port, starboard and stern, and then there's this stern post, which I reduced down because when we came down from Plymouth it was longer, and the other guy who helped me come down, the very first thing he did was push the tiller over, and it just broke that off straight away. So I've cut that down. It's not an ideal situation. Oh, I'm just using some self-amalgamating tape here just to tape up these a bit. So useful, this and gaffer tape. Well, very, very useful. When we were coming down from Plymouth, none of these lights worked, so I had to take them apart, and that was the only time I really felt as though I was going to be seasick. It's a bit of a swell, and I was below deck. Taking these lights apart, and later on I realized and discovered that it's the corrosion on the contacts on the deck, and the looseness of the pins in these devices, but there was also a loose contact, so it's all about contacts really. So if you put on the lower navigation lights and none of them work, your first thought is that a fuse has gone or something, but it's not that. It's the contacts are simply corroded. They corrode very fast. That's the importance of that electrical lubrication gel. doesn't seem to secure properly, this light. I don't know why. But it's not subject to much force, and it's never fallen off. That's one of the contacts. So you put the gel on the contacts and inside the socket. This you can see the container there, the support for the light. It needs varnishing. I've used wood skin before. I took this off completely and rebuilt this one because it's very easy to break this. If you fall against this, I broke it into several parts. Very annoying. But rather than varnish around it, it's best to just remove it from the deck. Well, the deck base there, and then varnish it separately somewhere else. It's too finicky to varnish on the deck. I didn't demonstrate the solar panels, how they the struts work. It's pretty obvious. You can just adjust the angle for different times of the year, and they just use carabiners to elevate them. And also another thing is that they will slide along when sailing roughly, so it's best to secure them. Using the same carabiners, you can secure them or use some small stuff to tie them onto the stanchion so they don't slide forward. Oh, this is just we've already seen a picture of this. This is just all the stuff that I'm currently using for a long trip. This is a scalpel set that's yeah. And you can see various batteries and Zippo lighter fuel for the hand warmers and so on. On the left of that drawer, top left, is the shoe for the handheld VHF radio, and I think it takes 3 or 4 AAA batteries. And that's in an emergency when the charger is not working, or if you're in the dinghy, life raft or something. The big AA battery, the big batteries there on the right, they're for the Horseshoe Lifebuoy strobe, which I fitted originally, but I found it got in the way, so I'll include a photo of that, and you might want to refit it. It goes on the outside of the safety wires. That stuff there is liquid rubber, so you can heat that up and form it into any shape, and then it solidifies when it goes cold. 9-volt batteries. I can't remember what the 9-volt batteries are for. These are 3 brushes, one for steel, one for brass, and one for something else. I use a lot of these Eneloop batteries. There must be about 20 at least on board in various devices, AAAs and AA's, and that's what the battery charger is for. There are 4 of those go in the DAB radio I use. couple of syringes, syringe needles and a syringe. That's one of the batteries for the headlamp, for the underwater torch. 3 new batteries there. Very useful, very good underwater torch, that. Well, I'm not going to run out of batteries, that's for sure. A couple of button batteries there and some 2032s. Again, I can't remember what that's for. Oh, for the binoculars. I haven't included those in the sale. They're well, maybe I put them in the extra additional inventory. I've got some Binolit marine binoculars, and they've got an illuminated night compass, and those batteries are used for that. Looks like some razor blades as well. Spare bags. I was just checking the batteries to see which ones are corroded. Other boxes I haven't shown you are a medical box with my own personal things like headache tablets and so on, suntan lotion and so on, and then a toiletry box, and then they'd have a couple on the other side for guests. There's the hand warmer. I have 2 of those, and there's a petrol fluid lighter as well. Gas canisters for the blowtorch, the kitchen blowtorch, and it's a good idea to have 4 or 5 bottles of meths around the place for the cooker. And this is me rubbing down the rails and so on. And using this extendable ladder, which is I find very useful. Well, there's one more, 2 more videos really need making. One for servicing the engine. A few things about that: the gearbox, the gearbox oil, the engine oil, the heat exchanger, and the impeller, water impeller, and and the antifreeze. Checking things, and then there's the sail configuration and some tips on sailing.